So this is what lawful rebellion is about. We're not advocating the removal of this or the government, because that would be inappropriate. What we're simply saying is, basically, if you voted for this government or you want to vote for David Cameron, well, you go and do it. But as far as we're concerned, David Cameron doesn't own us. And he can go and play with his toys in Parliament, and he can play with the European Union. But the Lisbon Treaty was unlawful and treasonous, so we are going to start to govern ourselves. It's a very powerful message. Numbers. They're frightened of numbers. When we started, we were sporadic groups. We knew the Marlborough group. We didn't have a group in Plymouth. That is now growing, and if you remember all of those blue dots, it's starting to spread across the country very quickly. It's quite exciting, actually. Now, one organisation says that you've got to lead beyond authority and think out of the box, and that's Common Purpose. Now, they're working for the bad guys, but we can pick up a few things from them. When your local MP says, but you must do this, you say, why? When are you going to get into Parliament and bring to justice the people who've stolen our money? Challenge them. That's what it's about. So this is it. Lawful rebellion is not an organisation, it's a state of mind. Instead of sitting at home and deciding you can't do anything, start to do something. If your friend is Conservative Party, they're still your friend. But you are going to be saying to them, are you going to do something or not? And we are seeing some fantastic things happen up in the Midlands, where we've got councillors working cross-party. We've got old Labour councillors suddenly starting to talk to the Conservative councillors again, because they realise how serious the situation is. And that's fantastic. So don't judge people by the party, judge them by them as an individual. Lawful rebellion is your statement that enough is enough, and you are now working alongside others. So if you think about it, if you're sending out letters, you're sending out newspapers, or you're doing anything for your group, just put a lawful rebellion logo on it, and other people can see which side you're on. So that is the 4 websites that you might like to go to. And this is our current newspaper, and we decided we were going to go for it. So if you read this article, we've based it around a gentleman called Gerard Batten, and the UKIP people in the audience will know that I've been highly critical of the lack of action by the leadership of UKIP, but on the basis of credit where it's due, Gerard Batten has been exposing these communists and Marxists appearing in the European Union. And since we can already identify them in Westminster, we've pushed out this information, and we've got a very good response to it. So I've gone very quickly. I'm going to finish there. Anything you want to challenge me on? Do I really mean that this country is being taken over by a Marxist ideology? I do. I can tell you that military people are getting very nervous at the situation, and I can tell you a lot of ex-special forces people are now talking in terms of what is necessary to defend the country. And I wouldn't joke about these things. Do I enjoy doing what I'm doing? I've met some brilliant people. I'd rather be at home reading a book, but I'm here and I do the other talks, and Mike has travelled from France to join the campaign because what's happening is unbelievably serious. We're just on a knife edge at the moment. We can win, but you've got to get off your bottoms and help us to get other people off their bottoms under lawful rebellion. Thanks very much. All I wanted to do is just say a few things to sort of try and package bits. I didn't want to talk about common purpose tonight because I've talked about it a lot, but I have to keep coming back to it. You have to understand the common purpose before you can understand how the bits I've talked about are controlled. Right? You think that everything's, sorry, that's a bit what's, I'm not allowed to say we think that local councils are still controlling everything. They're not. Control has been pushed sort of sideways into a very muddy pond with the quangos, the regional development agencies, the regional assemblies, and hundreds of charities, the third sector. And if you go to the Charities Commission site, you can start to see them, and I've quoted this before. You're talking about 177,000 of them, and our life is not getting better, it's getting worse, so they're not very charitable, and they've got a budget of 44 billion. So organisations that call themselves charities are not doing nice things. They're being used as a political agenda. We know where this comes from because a guy called Jeff Mulgan wrote a book on it, and he's closely connected with Julia Middleton from Common Purpose and another new think tank called the Young Foundation, which amongst other things is advising the Tory party. And both those two are linked to Demos, and Demos's background is Marxist. So once you dig into it, you start to see this network. And you have to see the network before you understand how the control works. Now, about a year ago, we were pushing a big stone, and it was pretty depressing sometimes. But about 6 months ago, something started to happen. And I can tell you that in a number of cities, particularly cities up north, local councillors, cross-party, have woken up, and they're asking what Common Purpose is doing in their city. And some of them have used some pretty right language to say, we want this organisation out of our city, because they realise that it's being used to control people in the public sector, in finances, in policy, so that they control the agenda in the city and not the elected councillors. I have one Labour councillor in a particular city who, having made a complaint about Common Purpose, was then warned off by his local Labour Party. Keep your mouth shut, don't ask questions. Now that was brilliant because that made him pretty annoyed, and he's now talking to other councillors to say, what is this? Old Labour people are our friends. I mean, we agree with some of their policies, a lot of their policies, and I'm not a conservative. But what I mean is that we have been driven into this hole of looking at other people by their labels. And I can tell you that old Labour people are looking at new Labour very, very carefully because they realise that they've been conned. And I think the same thing is going on in the Conservative Party. And I had an email, lost track of my days, yesterday, Monday, I had an email from a group up in London who've asked me if I'll go and speak to them. And their objective is to regain old Conservative values. So we are really starting to see some interesting things happen. I'm asked, do I talk to the BNP? And I say yes, of course, because every time I can get into a BNP audience, I can point out this business that if we end up with violence in this country, we lose. And I can also say in about probably 6 BNP audiences that I've talked to, I have learnt as well, because the majority of the people I've met, the overwhelming majority, were just like you, but they have got to the point where they cannot stand what is happening, and they've chosen the BNP as a route for doing things. I go and talk to Muslim people. We've now got Sikhs coming to see us and asking whether we'll do talks. So we will talk to any group. I don't want to talk to David Cameron because I don't trust him, and I wouldn't talk to Gordon Brown or Tony Blair. But any reasonable people I will talk to. And this is what we've got to get through, is the labels, because the labels are cultural Marxism, and that controls the way you think. So we've got to get back to looking at somebody, are they a decent moral person?